This is the Dover Download Podcast. My name is Christopher Parker, and for the past 25 years, I've had the pleasure of working with, learning from, and talking to a variety of volunteer, staff, and community members. This podcast explores conversations, activities, and a variety of policies and programs which exist here in Dover to improve the community in one way or another. The first step in the municipal budget preparation is the creation of the Capital Improvements Program. Today, Planning Director Donna Benton is going to walk us through that process and what highlights she thinks are in the 2026 to 2031 Capital Improvements Program. Donna, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
As I said, capital improvements time is here, and I know that you've been working with myself, Finance Director Dan Lynch, and City Manager Joyle to help put together a capital improvements program to cover the next few years. What has that process been like for you this year?
So it's been good. So obviously fall means different things to different people, but for us, it's Capital Improvements Program. So we start this in really the summer, and we gather all the different requests from the different department heads of either new projects they'd like to see or changes that they want to see to existing projects. Maybe they need more funding or costs are coming in higher. So we start kind of combing through those and looking to see how it matches with our number puzzle of debt that we're willing to take on versus that we're retiring in a certain year, what capital reserve amounts there are that we could use towards certain projects. So we start looking through that and kind of playing around with different projects and where they might fit in within the 6-year plan, or if they have to go beyond the 6 years that we kind of keep internally in our minds. And then once we get to a certain degree where we think it might work, we meet with the city manager and run it by him and get his feedback and his advice on it and make any changes necessary. And then we're pretty much ready to roll it out after we compile all the books and all the material that goes into the book. And so that is scheduled for October 16th this year for both the Planning Board and City Council.
So that joint meeting, I know typically it highlights the projects that are of note. On the past couple of years, it's been more about highlighting shifts we've had to make because inflation and other factors have really put pressure on the capital improvements program. Are you seeing similar pressures this year?
Yes, so we're still seeing the need to make adjustments like in the all project sheet on the page, which is kind of a summary in the document that goes over 2 pages with all the different projects. You'll see a lot of either underlined or italics, and that means change in schedule or change in cost. So you'll see a lot of those have been in the capital improvements program previously, but they're seeing some sort of change this year rather than typically matriculating through as they would. And then we also see plenty of bold items, and that means a new project. So we are seeing some new projects this year, which is exciting. And there weren't too many projects that were requested that we weren't able to fund. I think the department heads understood that it was going to be a tighter year, and instead of requesting projects that might not be in line with what we could afford or do based off our master plan, they kind of held those back and focused on the higher priorities.
That said, my read of it is that part of that understanding was that we have these conflicting interests of there's always maintenance to be done, there's always infrastructure that needs to be reviewed, but there's also the capacity of our staff to do that work that's needed and the funding capacity.
Right.
So I think that you've done a good job of hammering home to the staff that the manager wants to keep to the financial policies that we have, but also we have to be realistic about what we have capability to do, and particularly community services, which I think has a dearth of openings. So if you're interested in working with community services, it definitely have some openings, and I think that might be limiting how much they can take on too.
Right. They can't all put their projects into a certain year because they need to be spreading them out so that they have the capacity to get those done in a timely manner. Are
there areas that you look at it from the standpoint of just reviewing numbers and updating and not adding projects, or is it pretty much across the board there's new projects and activities in each year?
For most of the categories, there's at least 1 or 2 new projects, but there's a lot that are just changes in previous things or like the amounts that we're transferring to capital reserves for certain things. So those all kind of got mixed up a little bit or switched up a little bit so that we could afford certain things at certain times.
Before we dive into some of the projects, can you remind the listener what the categories are?
So the categories of the Capital Improvements Program are general government, police, fire and rescue, community services and public works, culture and recreation, public library, education, special revenue funds, TIF funds, and then water fund and sewer fund.
So those basically cover the general areas. And within those areas, if I remember correctly, which hopefully I do, you have projects that are grant funded, projects that are operating base funded, operating budget funded. You have projects that are debt financed, and then you have projects that are financed from the capital reserve, which is essentially our savings account.
Correct. And then a few either are grant funded or have existing funds.
What is the breakdown? Are we heavily reliant on debt? Are we heavily reliant on the operating budget? I know for a while we were really moving towards the capital reserve, which I think we've maintained a very good balance in my mind.
Yeah, it seems to be a good balance this year again, because we have quite a bit that is debt finance, but then quite a bit that we've tried to either add into our operating budget or have covered by the reserve accounts that we have. And then some are a mix and some are partially grant funded, and then another avenue for funding.
So that's great to know what those categories are. How does a project get put into one of those categories? What is the criteria that you use?
The criteria to get into the capital improvements program is that it should be an estimated annual aggregate cost of $25,000 or more and have a useful life of 3 years or greater. And then there's certain criteria such as protecting the health and safety of employees in the community at large, improving the efficiency of the existing services, preserving capital investment made by the city, or significantly reducing future operating costs or increasing the future operating revenues.
So you're going to do the rollout a little later this week, introduce the projects to the city council, the planning board, and then the planning board, they do their review independent, but sort of parallel, right?
Right. So their next meeting is October 22nd. So they would be reviewing this and having a public hearing at the planning board level. And then tangentially, the city council would be holding their own public hearings. And then they both vote. And so typically planning board votes and makes that recommendation to city council. And then after that happens, the city council would make their vote.
And the planning board is voting on how the projects match up with the master plan and are keeping with our strategic goals.
Right. And each project sheet goes into the different categories of where in the master plan it is spoken about and how it meets those categories of the master plan.
I know one of the toughest decisions in putting this all together is what's on the cover. What's on the cover this month?
It's a surprise. So there is a project for Nebby Park, and obviously the waterfront development is certainly a big project going on in the city right now. So that may be on the cover.
I haven't heard that. I wasn't aware. We have a waterfront project?
We do. We have a couple projects in the CIP that relate to that.
Working with the staff as you do to put this together, I know we've got a new rec director, we've got a new fire chief, we've got some other folks that don't have the experience that you've had putting together projects and pulling together information. Is this a good learning opportunity to make some changes, or is it reinforcing the principles and the policies that you've put in place to give the manager a CIP that hopefully will be sustainable?
I think they respect the policies that we have in place. So I think this year they were willing to kind of learn the way Dover does it. And we'll see next year, maybe they have suggestions of anything they've seen in other communities or that they've used in their previous roles. But this year, I think they were ready to step in and help however necessary to get these project sheets done and to get their projects allocated for.
So now we've covered what's in the CIP from a programmatic standpoint and how you put it together and what it means as far as the overall budget. Can you give us some highlights of projects that maybe continue to be in the CIP or maybe are new to the programming?
Sure. So some new projects worth highlighting are obviously the Littleworth Road Business Park, and that's with a development agreement for a project off of Littleworth Road. But you'll see that that's $6 million right now over the 6 years. And we also have the Durham Road Congestion Mitigation and Plan, and that was previously in the Capital Improvements Program years ago. We've received a CMAQ grant from the state, and so that you'll see in the Capital Improvements Program as well for another $6 million or so. The stormwater is certainly a big topic that we need to be looking at in the city. So we have a citywide drainage model and master plan, and then several reconstruction projects. And the reconstruction for roads aren't just the repaving it, but we're also looking at utilities often underneath. So if we're ripping up a road anyway, we might as well be replacing sewer and water if necessary and then going back and paving it so that we're not doing it out of order. So you'll see several of those. This year we combined neighborhood park investments into one project instead of having separate projects. And that way the recreation department can figure out what's necessary each year. So they have funding each year for that as proposed. The Nebby Park Pavilion and the waterfront development is a year one project, and that's new. The school is looking for a new intercom system replacement, and that's a new project, as well as the city is keeping the high school equipment storage bleacher turf track replacement, and that cost has gone up, and that's in year 2 now. So that's been kind of a newer project, but also had been in the plan previously.
Yeah, it's funny. That one's kind of an outgrowth of a project that began with the new high school and sort of is morphed into a, not necessarily finishing up a project, but really looking at it as a whole separate opportunity.
Right, absolutely. And then it's been brought to our attention that we need to be considering general parking garage repairs. So we've added that into the capital improvements program this year, along with parking meters and parking vehicles. And then there's a drinking water state revolving fund that's new. But one of the biggest projects and the most expensive is the Broadway neighborhood. And I remember probably 12 years ago, this was talked about in the capital improvements program. So it's still in there, and we're calling it a new project, but it's really revamped from the OCAM-ELA project. And we're looking at that kind of with a bigger scope.
That's a great example of a project that 12 years ago felt like it was a project we needed to understand better. And over time, we've got a stronger handle on what the depth of the project, both literally how deep we need to go, but also the amount of complexity with the various utilities that are underneath those roads and the roads itself that need to be reconstructed.
Yes, and that's definitely a good example, too, of taking our time to understand it, but also recognizing that sometimes the longer we wait to do something, unfortunately, the higher cost it is. So that's shown in the capital improvements program as well. And then several water main replacements and sewer main replacements, pump station upgrades. We typically see that, but in different areas. So some of those are newer.
I tend to think of the capital improvements program, certainly it's a manifestation of master plan recommendations, and it's also tying our fiscal policy with our physical policy. But in my mind, a big part of it is showing the residents and showing private investors that we have pride in our community and we want to take care of our infrastructure and that we don't let it languish. Some things have certainly languished. I'm not trying to say everything's perfect, but without this plan and without the work that you and the department heads that provide the information to you work on, we can't be taking care of things. And if we're not taking care of things, then that's really going to show through on the idea of why should we invest in Dover if the community's not going to invest in it.
Right. And I think the Dover way of doing the capital improvements program is nice because everything's very transparent. If you want to look at a detail for a certain project, each project sheet, I think there's about 114 of them this year, has that detail of what the description is, either a map or a photo describing that, how it meets the master plan, who requested it, the time and the money, and how it's being funded, so that people can really do a deep dive and understand that. Certainly there's been a lot of thought going into this and how the quotes were obtained, and that we're trying hard to make sure that it's accurate and we're accounting for inflation in the future and that we're doing things in a timely manner.
So as we wrap up, you're going to do the rollout on the 16th.
Correct.
People can find that online and through the city's webpage. The planning board's going to have its first review approximately a week later.
Right.
And then the council will hold its meetings. Is there a website or what's a good resource for people to track?
So Media Services does a great capital improvements update on the capital improvements program page of the website. And so what I typically do is if you just go to our homepage for the city of Dover and in the search bar type in capital improvements program, you'll get to that page. You can see previous year's capital improvements programs. Certainly this year's video and after of the rollout should be on there eventually, as well as the draft and dates of the public hearings, all the information you need if you're looking for the capital improvements program.
It's a one-stop shop.
Yes.
Thank you for coming in and for walking us through the CIP.
Thank you for having me.
Dover has a wealth of history in its over 400 years of existence. Coming up, Mike Gillis is going to share some of that history with us.
On October 14, 1931, a man called one of Dover's leading citizens, 75-year-old Arthur Whittemore, died at his Lexington Street home. His passing, which was unexpected, saw the entire community mourn the loss. His funeral 2 days later, on October 16th, held at St. Thomas Episcopal Church, prompted all Dover businesses to close for several hours that day in tribute. Then Mayor Jewett Chesley, by proclamation, ordered the offices of City Hall closed for the afternoon as well. Whittemore's funeral was attended by many local and state dignitaries, including all former mayors living at the time. Arthur Whittemore was known by the community for his many contributions to Dover, including as a 3-term mayor from 1901 to 1903, when mayoral terms were 1 year. As mayor, he had greeted and introduced President Theodore Roosevelt during a visit to Dover in 1902, an event that drew thousands to Dover's downtown. But Whittemore was also known as a forceful attorney, having been admitted to the New Hampshire bar in 1879 and handling many of the region's significant cases. In addition to serving as mayor, Whittemore's political career spanned both branches of the New Hampshire legislature, and in 1922, when serving as a state senator, he was the Republican Party's nomination for governor. He would lose that contest at a time when Republicans were swept from the governor's office and the legislature. Whittemore was certainly known for many other roles, whether as chair of the New Hampshire Railroad Commission, president of the local bank, or someone who was able to secure the means from the former Franklin Academy to construct a new high school in the building that is now home to the McConnell Center. But he was especially revered for his commitment to community, including as a champion of the public library. As a trustee of the Dover Public Library, he played a critical role in securing funding from Andrew Carnegie for a new library building, the current library, which opened in 1905 after a dedication ceremony in which he turned over the keys to the building to the city. At that ceremony, Whittemore would say of the new library, quote, "This building belongs to the public, and in the years opening before us, it will be more and more the mecca of our citizens seeking information and mental recreation."
Thanks for listening to the Dover Download this week. If you like what you heard, subscribe through your favorite podcast aggregator. And if you have something you want to hear a topic on, let us know. Finally, this is just one of the many ways we share information about the city of Dover. You can subscribe to the Dover Downloads email newsletter every week or other newsletters that we have by going to the City of Dover homepage, www.dover.nh.gov. Have a great week.